ready to go.
All right, go ahead.
Are we ready?
Yep.
All right, it's November 10th, 2019, and I'm Robbie Robbins, also known as No Sweat. That's my pen name that I write under. I've written several books and write lots of articles. And I'm out in the aviary right now, in one of the aviaries, with my family of Sions. All these Sions came down from, basically from Charles Heitzman. I've had Sions from different people from all over the United States. I've visited many of the best Zeon lofts in the United States in my life. And I like to believe that this is the core of the best Sions now still alive in the world. I breed primarily for long distance. Right now, going on today, I have 15 young birds that are trying to come home from the East Coast from 500 miles. I had a friend that released them hopefully this morning. I haven't heard from him yet. I had taken those young birds 100 miles south, their first toss, 100 miles west, their second toss, 200 miles south, their third toss, and today they went 500 miles east. So it takes a pretty good pigeon to do that. It's kind of bright, so the colors are a little bit disoriented right now, a little bit off in color. They're a little bit lighter colored than what you could see the birds in good light. It is good light, but it's almost too bright. I just picked this bird up just now as my friend Sam and I walked out into the aviary here. We herded this group of birds out of this side of the loft. I just picked this particular bird. It's a blue pencil cock. I don't have but just one or two pencils in all of the birds. He's this year's bird, and I kept him back off this 500. He has flown a 100 and 200 miles. He's out of hardcore junior and Little Chattanooga. He's line bred back onto hardcore, which was a 600-mile young bird, and he's one of the directions that I want to go with the racing pigeons, with the Sions. These are not very pretty birds. They have usually a violet eye, sort of a pearl violet type eye. They're not big birds. They're not real pretty birds in the face, but they have extremely good homing instinct. They're medium size, and some of them are medium small, and some of the hens are very small. They're kind of loose feathered, very soft feathered pigeons. And I get a wide range of vents and backs with them. Some of them open back, but the birds that I'm getting out of this particular line right now are all real tight vented and closed back. He's not one of the prettier ones or one of the best ones, but he's one of them I want to keep out of the bunch. Just, I think he'll make a good breeder down the line. He's, I don't know when he hatched, somewhere in the middle of the year. I've been letting some pairs breed all year long this year for the first time in my life. And some of those birds have raised as many as 18 pigeons out of one pair this year. I have about 4 pairs that's done that this year, some of the key pairs. My birds are extremely tame by nature. I've got another person out here in this aviary with me right now, which is making them a little bit nervous. And I've got them all crowded up, which is making them a little bit nervous. But my birds are very, very tame. I don't keep any wild birds, any birds that butt against a cage or got a wild nature about them. I don't breed them, and I don't keep them. There's some variation in the head. You know, that's one of the first things you look at when you look at a pigeon is his face. And the Sions are not recognizable, contrary to what a lot of people say. Oh, you can recognize a Sion anywhere. I've talked about that at length. The original Sions that were imported from Paul Zeon into America, there was a wide variation of them. Some of them with snappy faces, some of them with large bodies. And the birds later on, after Robert Zeon went back to the French underground to recollect the birds that his father had to give to the French underground, because the Germans had issued a proclamation that they would kill anybody they caught with racing pigeons in France right after the Blitzkrieg, after they'd gone into Belgium, not Belgium, but country just north of France. I guess it was Belgium, I think. No. Poland. I'm sorry, it is Poland what I'm trying to think of. And so Paul Sion had given his birds to the French underground, and later on Robert, near the end of the war, went back to collect 75 of those birds. And when he did so, he collected a lot of Sions that were pleasing to him. Not just birds that were, had flown well like his father stressed, but birds that were, had a certain look to them. They were more like that kind of bird. They had what they call the 051 look to them. They had a wedge. They had a wedge face where it comes to just with a wedge look in the head, and they had like that apple body that tapers off. And you'll see that in many of these Sions. And that is the classic type Sion that people are talking about. But you'll also see other Sions in here that don't look like that. But all in all, when you start looking at a whole group of birds, they're very similar in size. I have out here pretty much all blue bars and silver bars, but I have many red checks, a few blue checks, and on occasion I'll breed a black check. But this is some of the birds that I will be using for breeders this coming year. There are some late hatches mixed in with this group of birds. One of the things about the Sions is that they were the most predominant strain of racing pigeon in the United States for 40 years, all over the entire United States, from the west coast to the east coast, south and north, and they flew well at 100 miles, they flew well at 500 miles, 600 miles. And it's odd to me that today that there's very few Sion people left alive that have really good Sions that they actually race. And I know of hardly any of them other than myself that are actually flying them in major competition. And one of the reasons my birds do well is because I stress long distance. Every year I take all the young birds out to at least 500 miles. Last year Sam and John McQuicker and I took the birds 700 miles, and I got 4 of the birds back. They're all 4 gone now. But we did get, it was the longest toss in the entire world. Let me try to, I'd go back trying to catch these birds in here. They're going to jump. You'll see this aviary here. We're out here in the country. We've got trees and the creek and farmland here. And I've got these sticks all up through here, and it looks kind of crazy for pigeons, but these pigeons actually love this on a day when everybody's comfortable and, and everybody's got the full crawl and stuff. They love to come out here. It's kind of like a little social spot for pigeons. Like some said here and something. I don't try to do like everybody else does with pigeons, have everything always exactly so, everything uniform and following what everybody else has ever done. I try to keep the pigeons happy. You got happy pigeons, it helps promote good health, and good health, leads to success with birds. I never have any diseases. I never have any health issues. For the last 15 years, the ratio of sick birds has been just almost nothing. And I give a lot of the birds water. In the wintertime, I have to give them water out of the creek right over here beside of us. I know all these birds. That's little Chattanooga right there, that little pencil hen. She's out of, she looked very much like her mother. She's out of a pencil hen that I called Chattanooga that flew. I took her 200 miles down to Chattanooga, and she was caught by a hawk right in front of me, and I saw the hawk carry her off, and naturally you would never dream that the bird would come back. She came back the next day, had one tail feather, and was torn on the side. And I didn't fly her the rest of that year, but the next year I took her 600 miles and let her loose as a yearling, and she came back as she was covered in tar and oil. And a little bitty hen, and I've got pictures of her, because I couldn't even believe she'd flown 50 feet, let alone come back 600 miles. And so I retired her after that. Any bird should have had that strong of a homing instinct to come back, and her nestmate was a pencil cock that had also flown in the AU convention race in Boston that year and finished in the top 20. So it's a real good line. They've bred a lot of really good pigeons for me. They're small pigeons. They've got real strong homing instinct. and they've got the kind of bodies, the little small bodies that do well at long distances. A lot of them are chestnut eyed, chestnut and orange colored eyes. I don't get many pearl eyes or violet eyes along in that family of birds. If you traced them on back a little bit, I had a really beautiful lace, black check, white flight cock that flew 500 miles several times, made it back onto a little bitty, tiny, smoky colored blue bar hen. I called her the Dove or number one, and her band number was 007, and she flew 500 miles many times. And these hens all still go back kind of like on number one was. They were little bitty blue bar. She was a little bitty dove colored blue bar hen, and I called them doves because sometimes the babies almost look like doves. They're real small birds with those, the way mourning doves, the way their eyes come out of their head. They remind me of a mourning dove, the way their eyes are positioned in their face. Most of these blue bars go back onto the Leroy blue bar bloodlines, and Leroy was a blue bar cock that Lou Curtis had imported into the United States from Paul Zeon, and Charles Heitzman got a couple of birds down out of Leroy, and so did the very top pigeon men all over the United States that do well, particularly at long distance. If you really studied the Zeon blood, the guys in California and other places, it was all going back onto the Leroy blood. And I think I'm probably the only guy in the United States today that has been able to maintain that Leroy blood. Heitzman's original pair of Sions that he called his original pair, he called them 1103 and 1044. It was two red chicks, and one of them was out of Leroy. So you're getting Leroy blood almost any time you get an original Heitzman Zeon anyways. These two little birds right here just came out of the nest like in October. They're both out of Hardcore Junior and Little Chattanooga. Little Chattanooga's out of Hardcore and Chattanooga, and Hardcore Junior's out of Hardcore and Long Wings. So both of them are out of line. Were out of Long Wings, which was about my best 600-mile young bird I'd ever bred, or one of the best. And so I line bred back onto him, and I've been real happy with that mating this year. I rated it as possibly the number one mating, and I had a strawberry hen almost identical to this little hen here. Of course, it was mature. It was a beautiful pigeon that was flying in the Hoosier Classic this year, and made it all the way up to the final race, and had flown very well in all the races going up to that race, and was burned up in the race. And I had my heart believing that bird had a real good shot at winning the 350. It was a bird would have been very much like that. Of course, you'd have to add on, 4 or 5 months of maturity. But that's the kind of bird that has flown very well up there in the Hoosier. And as I'm speaking right now, I have a blue bar cock in South Africa named First Blood that are full brothers to these two birds. That is also right now has flown. He's been through 2 quarantines and 5 loft inspections, and now has flown 4 or 5 training races, and he's still there, which is tough to do. It's a credit to any bird. The South Africa race probably is really the best race now in the world when you stop to think about all the things that are involved in it. Trying to keep the birds healthy throughout the whole process, and getting the birds settled, and going through all those many different training tosses they have. And then flying through 35 training tosses to finally make it to the last race. It takes a pretty special pigeon to do that, and I can understand why the top fanciers throughout the world that really do fly pigeons and appreciate racing pigeons understand why. Yeah, that really is a good pigeon that winds up, even though it might have been, you could fly that same race the very next day, a different bird win. Still on that given day, that's a pretty special bird that wins that race. And of course, you can't help but admire Mike Gaines for as much as he's put into that race, and as much as he's done to promote that race. And he's definitely got a target on him when I make birds to win that race. I'm aiming at Mike Gaines and some of the other best fanciers. And it's pretty tough for me to do because I'm using these Sions, and Mike's able to cross a lot of champion pigeons back and forth together. But I think because I have control of the genes here, that I'm as much equal to him and being able to produce a good pigeon as he is mixing genes, the way he goes about doing it. So it's two different schools of thought. Mine's more of what I call old school, and what the old fanciers always did, trying to develop a family and working within a group of genes. And it's not that easy when you know, I raised this year 400 young birds. Last year I raised about 275, and the year before that I raised 535 birds. And so you're trying to keep understanding that genetic web that's going on with 500 pigeons all the time, and trying to harness it and keep control of it. It's a lot of paperwork. This year's it's a lot of constant thinking, laying in bed and dreaming up marriages for your birds, and how to click things. I feel really good. You know, that's one of the great things about pigeons, is that, you know, the next year, spring's eternal. No matter what you did last year, the next year you think, well, I'm going to do better this year. I've really got some secrets up my sleeve for next year. I did it when I used to show pigeons, and I still do it with the racing pigeons. And I'm real excited about 2020. I really feel like that I've got my thumb down on right where the best racers are coming from, particularly with the Africa races. I'm starting to see some patterns develop out of these birds. You know, last year I flew birds in Africa that were all small blue hens. And this year I took a big chance and I sent some really big cock birds. And I know better than to do that, but I still had to do it. And oddly enough, a lot of those big cock birds, I still have 12 of the original 20 that are still in that race right now today. And a lot of those are those big cock birds. And my thinking was, with those big cock birds, it was 60 years of flying pigeons. I thought, you know, if you get a really big pigeon that's built perfect, even though he's big, and if you can get him toned down where he's working out every day, almost like they are in Africa, keep that weight off of him, you might develop a real athlete in that group of pigeons, something that can handle it. And I don't look at that 350 as a long distance race so much as I look at it as a long middle distance race. And I also had in the back of my mind of a lot of the birds that I've seen come out of Belgium, and a lot of the birds that I've seen that have come from Germany as well, Klaus and that whole group of fanciers over there, the best in the world. I've noticed that a lot of their birds are not small pigeons, that they are a bigger type pigeon. So I thought, well, I'll try it this year. This is only my second year to fly. I will fly some of the old bigger birds. And so it's still in a state of experimentation for me, but I'm trying to see if the bigger birds will do well. That little cock bird over, I call him Blue Arrow. He's out of the bird I call the pencil cock, and my favorite sister. I love him. To me, he represents, he's the right size, he's got the right kind of face. Sam's got a brother to him that's probably a better pigeon than he is, in all honesty. But he was more down to what I wanted. He was a perfect blend of his daddy and his mom. And that's what you want to do when you're mating pigeons. You want to try to blend the mom and daddy together in such a way that the babies get the very best of both parents. Not only get the best of both parents, but what you wind up having is babies that are better than the parents. And if you can successfully and consistently breed two pigeons together and raise babies out of them that are better than either one of the parents, then you're a pretty good pigeon man. And you're way better than most, because very few fanciers do that. They'll put two great pigeons together, they'll buy a champion here and buy a champion there, and they just hope that the babies will fly as good as one of the parents. They don't hope that it's going to be better than the parents. But almost always when I'm putting two better pigeons together, I'm always trying to raise babies that are better than either one of the parents. You know, the Sions started around the turn of the century, just a little bit after. Paul Zeon used the Weggies and the Stassards to basically form his birds, and then he traded back and forth with Stassard a lot. Stassard traded back and forth with Zeon a lot. And those birds they had then, they didn't look like this. They were a lot more variance in them. I've seen some Sions that, like I said, had wings that were like aircraft carriers, big with, and I've seen Sions with little tiny birds. You know, Heitzman, when I went into his loft, and I knew Heitzman's birds as well as he did the last 10 years of his life, he had a huge variation of pigeons in big and little and stuff. Some of his birds were huge. Heitzman did not pay any attention much to open vents or open backs. He was, it didn't matter to him. What Heitzman concentrated on more than anything was how well they came back from the sky. If they happened to have an open back, he didn't care. If they happened to have an open vent, he didn't care. And when you went into Heitzman's loft, it was nothing to see at least, when you went there, you might see 400 pigeons or 500 pigeons. In the spring, you might see 600 or 700 pigeons. And it wasn't anything to see 50% of them open back with a big gap running down their back. She's not open back. She's got a wing. I don't have any open back birds. But I do have some that are open vented. The few open vented birds that I have are almost all coming down on one particular pair I call the summertime line. That's Elvis right there. And this past year I made it Elvis the Fatty. Anytime you see one of the double blue banded birds of mine, they're very special. I've got a few of them in here. There's one over there. They come down from some of the very finest pure Zeon blood that I've ever been around in my life, out of a powder silver cock that flew 500 miles 6 times. And you just don't see 500 miles 6-time pigeons anymore today. Used to it was common. You'd see a 500-mile bird that had flown 10 times. But today, the odds in finding a 500-mile 10-time bird would be phenomenal. Here, I'll catch one of these birds here in just a minute, but there's no really use to me. That little black-eyed Zeon back there, they call them black eyes. I've got a few of them, and there's a lot of people that will write to me and ask about black-eyed Zeons. Do you have any of the black-eyed Zeons? I have very few. She's really not a black eye. It's a violet eye with a little green in it when you get to looking at it. I had her mated back to a blue check cock this past year named Ocala, and they raise beautiful racers. She goes back. This hen flew 500 miles, and she flew as a young bird. And to me, she was so beautiful. I couldn't help but stock her. She's raised a lot of good birds. I've not raised any what I call super great pigeons out of her. Real soft feather, just has that look about her. Very typical old Zeon line. Medium-sized bird, maybe a little, for her just a little bit on medium. She's got what year is she? I forget what year she is. AU 2014 KY 74, and she's got a sister named 35 down there. That's in the other loft, a blue bar hen. That looks similar to her, but doesn't handle as good as her and doesn't have as dark eyes she does. And 35's actually been a better breeder than she has. She's got a long line of 500 and 600 mile blood all in her. Oh, I wanted to mention, you'll see that she's KY banded, and that all of Charles Heitzman's Zeons, all of his birds, whether they were Zeons or whatever, he had the KY bands issued to him all his life, and he would start out, if it was say the year 1950, so that he would know just by looking at the band number what year it was. It would say 50, 0, 51. So he would start the first 2 numbers out on his band series when he'd order them. They would be that year. So if it was 1949, it'd be 49. He would start out with 49,000, and 49,001, 49,002 or whatever. And his red cock that he had was 5051. His iconic red cock is 50-051. The bird was born in 1951. It was 51-051. So that's how he was able just to look at a bird's band and know what year it was born in. And Heitzman always used a KY band on one side and his name and address band on the other. Which today, since we're flying in so many of these one loft races and other things, it's very rarely are double banding the birds. I do double band some of the birds that I know I'm going to keep for one reason or another, and I do fly them myself. But to send them to a one loft race, you're not going to be double banding them. So, but I do love this particular hen. She's one of my favorites in the loft. I've had her for a long time. She's a good 500 mile bird, and I don't know who I'm going to mate her to yet this year. I I haven't made up my mind about her. I thought about making her back on to Elvis this year. And Elvis is, to me, he's a classic Leroy Sion. I've studied the faces. This is Elvis. I named him that because I think he's so good looking. And he would match very well with that hen I just had because they're similar body and feather wise. They would raise a high quality pigeon beast, and they would have a beautiful face. You saw what her face is. That's the first thing you look at when you look at a pigeon is its face. And if you want to see what the old Leroy face looked like, there it is. That's it. I can show you pictures of Leroy, and he's a clone. He's down over all those years. And he is the Leroy. That's the kind of bird Leroy was. He was this size, that face. You know, he might as well be Leroy. That's one of the reasons that I love that pigeon so much, because that's Leroy right there. The silvers I have, all these silvers come down basically from two lines of the Sions. There's the La Rosalette and the Grizz Sions, and that's what the blue banded birds come down that line. I love this top back here with the violet eyes. He's very much my type of bird. I've got him over here. A little bigger, stronger pigeon than others. A lot of guys like to breed out of a bird that's got a little more length to it like that. There's a lot of different, it just depends on who you made him back to. He handles like a dream, this bird does. He's got a completely different eye than the other birds. You see it's almost a pearl violet eye, real bright. And a lot of birds in Africa really fly good with that kind of eye. Fantastic pigeon. You know, you don't see birds of this quality very often. And, you do, but with the Sions today, where's Fatty at? I call her Fatty. She's not the biggest pigeon in here. She gets that name because when I put the feed down, she's the first one to come and eat. So, and some of the people that love the Sions, I get like this. They love the silvers. And certainly the silvers and the reds are a trademark of the Sions, and the mealies. And of course, if you're going to fool with silvers, you're going to wind up falling in love with powder silvers. And that's what we call a powder silver. They're the lighter color silvers. They usually have a little less color in their hackle here. Some of them, you know, like him, he's a darker there, but you'll find some powder silvers that are white all the way down through here. They really, when they're flying in the sky, they look solid white when they're flying in the sky. You see the hawk spot them a mile off, but they are absolutely gorgeous pigeons. And now this is an absolute classic, what I call Robert Zeon type pigeon. He has that Zeon look, that Zeon face, everything about him, and he's down a little bit in size, which is really where you want him. That's a beautiful, fantastic Zeon, soft feather. They're in such good condition right now. You know, it's getting close to winter, and I've been feeding them a little bit too much. So I want to catch one of the birds here. He's out of, I can tell without even knowing who he look him up. This is a bloodline that's done very well for me over the years. This is a hardcore and long wing. And he's just a real typical hardcore long wing bird. They're not the prettiest colors. A lot of times they're kind of off mealies. This one's a really nice one to be out of that pair. I raised almost 40 young birds out of it. And I still got a few of them. And very few of them I've let out. Some of them have gone to Japan. They've gone different places, but they're very good breeders. That genes in that bloodline holds up well. It goes from one generation to the next generation to the next generation, and they do well for several people. But that's hardcore and long wings right there, that blood. Once you get used to looking at it, you can tell it the face and everything else. I've got one again over here that's, I wanted to show you one of the characteristics about this blood. You don't see it too often. You can, it's just a color, it's a color. You'll see it in these flights. There's almost like a chocolate or a gray coloring. It comes back out in these flights. It'll be on the red checks and on the silvers both. You'll see it, and when you see it on my birds here, you don't see it there, you don't see it there. You see it here, but when you do see it, it's just almost like a bell goes off. That tells you real quick that's hardcore blood. And that's his. This is a bird that's hardcore's his grandfather on both sides on this bird. That's this year's bird. And one out of Hardcore Junior in Little Chattanooga. I kept him back to breed from. And he's flown 200 miles. But I wanted to keep him. I mean, just such a well-bred pigeon, line bred like that. I'm trying to push the Sions into the, what I call the new world of pigeon racing, which is a different world than what I grew up in. It's basically one loft racing and flying against thousands of birds, flying against the best birds in the world. And to do that, you have to breed superior pigeons. So I don't want to give my competition any advantage. This is a fantastic pigeon. See how his back cover, see how he tapers in the back, all comes down. He's very streamlined. He's a very balanced bird. I mean, there's people that used to say that the bird has that kind of posture where the tail comes down and touches. That's the kind of bird you look for in a long distance. You see on his back cover there, on his coverts, you see the little riffle on the back, the little fold in the feather. Charles Heitzman always swore to me that that's what he looked for in breeding pigeons. He always told me, Bobby, that's a thickness of the feather, and that's what you want. I'm not so sure he's correct about that, but that was something a little thing that Charles Heitzman liked to have. You saw it in a lot of his red checks. You saw that, and you see it in a few of his silvers, and he's carrying it. And I kind of like it too. I do get a lot of it in the hardcore blood, but he's not hardcore blood. So you'll see he's double banded, and he comes down from there's Hardcore Junior. Out of the 40 young birds that I raised out of hardcore and long wings, I considered him the very best bird that I bred out of the 40. That little silver cock right there. He's as close to being hardcore without being hardcore. He's identical to hardcore. Same face, same body, same everything. And he's got the same eye. Hardcore had a really mysterious pearl type eye, and he has that same eye. And he's a fantastic breeder. He's raising me a lot of great pigeons. You can look up through here and get a rough idea of what this group of Sions is. I'm going to show you more today, but I just wanted to give you some discussion about the Sions that I have. I wanted to shoot a video because there's a lot of people that want to see the birds that I've been working with to get them to where they're at. They're acting like pigeons will when you get them cornered like that. So, one of the things about the Sions that I meant to say was that they're probably the most beautiful long distance racing pigeon in the world. You can talk about long distance birds. The Gordons were beautiful. The Gordons looked, a lot of the Gordons look like Sions. Of course, most of them are darker colored. You see a lot of black checks in the Gordons and stuff. But certainly the Trentons and birds that earned reputations for flying long distances, and even some of the birds today that fly long distances. And some of them are beautiful, but the Sions, they've got